Good evening, everyone. This is David Marin with the League of Women Voters. We're delighted tonight to bring you a forum with the two candidates for Ventura County District Attorney. Candidates are John Barrick and Eric Massarenko. The way this will work tonight, it will go for about an hour and 15 minutes or so. We have the two candidates. They'll have opening statements of about a minute and a half and closing statements of the same amount of time. We randomly drew numbers to decide who would go first. The questions, they'll each have a minute and a half, and if they signal me for a rebuttal, we'll allow that as well. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the president of the League of Women Voters, Betsy Patterson.
Good evening. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920, 6 months before ratification of the 19th Amendment, granting women their right to vote nationwide. It was established and continues today as a nonpartisan grassroots political organization to encourage voters to become informed and active participants in our representative democracy. As a nonpartisan organization, the League does not support or oppose any candidates or any political parties. The League engages in many activities to ensure our democracy works, such as registering voters, educating them about the issues and the candidates, getting out the vote during elections, and supporting fair and transparent elections. The goal of our candidate forums is to allow voters an opportunity to ask candidates questions and hear their positions on issues that affect our communities. The questions were submitted by attendees when they registered for the forum, and the questions were not provided to the candidates in advance. Thank you for joining us. We hope you learn a lot about the candidates and the issues that we face. And now I will turn it back over to our moderator, David Marin.
Thank you, Betsy. We'll go ahead and begin with our opening statements. John Barrick, you're going first. When you're ready, a minute and a half.
Thank you. When I started working in the Ventura County District Attorney's office 17 years ago, I set a rule for myself that I have never broken, and that's victims come first. That meant for me, serving crime victims and their families was more important than my pride, my ego, even my professional career if necessary. That rule was important to me because I grew up in this county, in Oxnard actually, the first candidate for district attorney to be able to say that in decades. And when I made the decision to be a prosecutor, the only county that I wanted to serve was my home county of Ventura County. Thus, to serve my community to the best of my ability, I established that rule to remind myself that I serve the public first before anything or anyone else. I'm not a career politician. I never had any interest in running for office or district attorney. But I was dismayed by certain things going on in this state and no one doing anything about it. Laws that gut victims' rights, no knowledge of these laws being passed on to the public, the negative treatment of law enforcement and politics entering into the decision-making process. So when my boss unexpectedly announced his retirement, I felt compelled to run because we need solutions that are real, not just solutions that sound good, which is why I've been endorsed by every Peace Officer Association in Ventura County. Everything you will hear tonight will be my words and my ideas. Unlike what some career politicians do, I didn't farm out my talking points to others to tell me what or how to think. What I will say will reflect what I believe needs to be done in this county to protect its citizens, not only from criminals, but damaging laws coming out of Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next candidate is Eric Massarenko.
Good evening. Nice to see you, David Marin. I'd like to begin by thanking the League of Women Voters of Ventura County, President Patterson, and Mr. Moran, thank you very much for taking the time to moderate this important discussion and forum. I also want to commend and thank the League of Women Voters for their ongoing educational workshops to bring awareness and education about the different county departments here in Ventura County. I'm very proud to serve and protect Ventura County as the Ventura County District Attorney. Through collaboration, through hard work, through intelligence, we have made significant strides in our office while keeping the public and our residents safe. Specifically, we have secured additional funding for domestic violence cases and crime victims. In fact, we will soon be launching the first ever cold case sexual assault unit to address the backlog of rape kits. We have also secured additional resources for our family justice centers. One in particular will soon launch in the city of Oxnard to bring services, support, and healing to monolingual, Mixteca Indigenous, and farm working populations. We have also been tough on organized retail theft and home burglary crews. I look forward to this discussion, and I want to again thank the League for hosting it.
Thank you. Eric, we're going to start with you. First question is, as County District Attorney, what would you do to decrease crime? And do you think Ventura County should still be considered tough on crime? Do the numbers back that up?
Thank you for the question. What we're doing right now is working. The county remains safe. We've seen recent crime statistics, Oxnard, for example, at a 10-year low. Port Hueneme, similarly, at historic crime lows. We have to continue to do what we're doing, but also build in innovation and build in forward thinking. I'm very proud of the mental health unit that we have launched in the Office of the District Attorney to look at alternatives to incarceration, to prioritize when safe and appropriate to do so, rehabilitation and treatment. We also have to look at other best practices, including restorative justice. We will have a restorative justice program called Transforming Harm into Healing, which will begin this summer. It will deal with juvenile offenders to address the underlying causes of their behavior. But at the end of the day, we have to remain true to our core mission. We have to look at offenders. If the facts and evidence warrant criminal filing, we should continue to do so. And when people say remain tough on crime, I respond to them by saying we look at each case on its individual facts, on the individual circumstances, and we make the best, the fairest, and the right call.
Thank you. John, same question to you as a County District Attorney. What would you do to decrease crime? And do you think Ventura County can still be considered a tough on crime area?
Yeah, well, one of the things we need to do to reduce crime is to have more police officers. You know, COVID has really wiped us out. And while everyone was out and, you know, shut in at home, crime didn't stop, but our ability to prosecute those cases did. And so because of the courts closures. So as a result, we have this tremendous backlog of cases now, and we're not able to prosecute those cases the way we want to because of that backlog. And as a result, we're having to give dispositions on a lot of cases that we normally wouldn't give to clear the backlog. We need more help. You know, I hear it all the time. I'm a frontline DA. I work with frontline DAs. They're in the trenches every day doing the things that are necessary. And they come to me and they complain all the time about how overworked they are and how unsupported they are. And so that needs to change. We need to support our law enforcement. We need to support our line deputies to do more so we can actually prosecute the cases that are being filed so we can actually get the dispositions they deserve. And to answer your question about tough on crime, yeah. The last thing Ventura County wants is to become a county like Los Angeles or San Francisco, where their anti-crime policies have led to a rampant increase in property crime and violent crime. In fact, the FBI just released some data from 2019 that showed that the city of Ventura violent and property crime rate increased so dramatically that they are now last in the county on those two fronts. And so we need to continue to be tough on crime because otherwise we're going to turn into counties we don't want to be.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to stay with you, John, for the next question. And we
David,
have a lot.
I think Mr. Nazarenko wanted to rebut.
Yeah,
Oh,
may I
sorry.
rebut that?
Yes.
You know, this is from the Ventura County Star, May 18th, 2020. Major crimes in Ventura reached their lowest rate in 2 decades last year, according to data shared by the Ventura Police Department. In a statement included with the report, Police Chief Darren Schindler offered some reasons for the decline in property crime rates across the board. According to Chief Schindler, additional staffing enhancements made possible by Measure O and approved by the Ventura City Council have created the capacity for an enhanced focus on some of the most prolific criminal offenders. That's what I was able to accomplish as a county.
Thank you, Eric. Got to stop you there, though. John, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, I pointed to data from the FBI, the Uniform Crime Reporting Database, that showed that the city of Ventura, where Mr. Nazarenko was a city councilman from 2014 to 2021, saw a dramatic increase in not only violent crime, but property crime in the city of Ventura. In fact, the county of Ventura, they ranked dead last. So yes, we still need to have tough on crime policies because I don't know what the data is from 2020, but I'm telling you, and I've talked to people, people do not feel safe.
Thank you. And so, gentlemen, yes, when you want to rebut, just raise your hand or something so I'll be able to see. Hopefully, I'll be on the ball. John, we'll start with you on the next question. We'll talk about drugs now. What will you do to prosecute the increase of meth, heroin, and especially fentanyl-related crimes in our county?
Well, the problem we have is that the California state legislature has really handcuffed our ability to prosecute drug crimes the way we used to. In 2011, they enacted a penal code section 1170H, which practically decriminalized drug use in the state of California. And it's gotten to the point now with some other laws that they've passed that people who are either under the influence of drugs or in possession of drugs are either not having their cases filed or just getting credit time served, maybe a few hours in jail, and off they go. Drug dealers can't go to prison anymore. And, so on the one hand, Californians they don't want to see their jails and their prisons crowded with people who have drug or substance abuse problems, which I completely respect. But on the other hand, the California state legislature has completely handcuffed us because the ways we could try to get treatment for those people, it doesn't make any sense anymore. We don't have that carrot to hold in front of them to try to get them to the treatment they need. And that's because the decriminalization of drug use. In addition, the state of California is now passing out meth pipes and needles to everyone. So we don't want people to be in jail or prison for drug use, and yet we decriminalize drug use, we decriminalize drug possession, we can't send drug dealers to prison, and now we're giving them the tools in which to continue their addiction. So to get tough on crime or tough on drug use, we need to start enhancing our penalties again for those crimes. Otherwise, nothing we do is going to be effective.
Thank you. Same question to you, Eric. What will you do to prosecute the increase of meth, heroin, and fentanyl-related crime?
Thank you for the question. Before I respond to it, I just want to respond to Mr. Barrick's assertions about the city of Ventura. Let me tell you what I'm not going to do during this debate and what I won't do as your Ventura County DA. I won't resort to fear mongering and scare tactics. I believe in collaboration. I believe in working with other policymakers and building coalitions. I think it's frankly offensive to the 110,000 people of the city of Ventura, which I live in, to describe it as unsafe. It is one of the safest cities and it will remain so. And in response to your question, David, we have to look at drug possession as a multifaceted and complex issue. Certainly there has to be enforcement. I believe, particularly with the surge in fentanyl, we have to be strong on interdiction with the DEA, with our local and state and federal partners. We have to make sure this deadly drug does not flow into Ventura County streets. We also have to continue to have public messaging to prevent our youth from taking it and understanding how lethal and potent it can be. We also have to look at opportunities to take these individuals, steer them towards treatment, steer them towards rehabilitation, and give them an opportunity for a better path.
Thank you. John, rebuttal?
Yeah, briefly, I'm not resorting to scare tactics or fear mongering if it's the truth. You don't have to believe what I'm saying, but that doesn't mean I'm lying to you. If you want to know where these stats are coming from, email me. I will gladly send you the links. And that goes for you too, Mr. Massarenko. As the district attorney, you are required to tell people the truth about what's going on in their county and not just the truth as you see it.
Mr. Massarenko, would you like to rebut?
You know, in the city of Ventura, when I served on its city council, Chief Mike Tracy, then city council member, and then Chief Ken Corney, both of whom are supporting me, longtime friends and supporters, said we need to boost the resources for our police department. And I stepped forward and along with a lot of others, including Mike and Ken, helped to pass Measure O. That was in consultation with the Chamber of Commerce, with our business community. Anybody who goes down Main Street to see that pedestrian promenade and to
Eric,
see the people.
I'm sorry, your time is up. 30 seconds goes quick, gentlemen, on the rebuttals. But Eric, you're up first on this next question. We're going to shift to mental illness. And tell us as DA, what would be your approach, or how do you feel the district attorney should really approach cases that involve charges against a person with mental illness or severe mental illness?
On a case-by-case basis, there are going to be certain cases, certain incidents that are so serious, so violent that we simply cannot divert. We cannot entertain alternative dispositions. But nevertheless, particularly among these low-level offenses, we have to look for different ways of going about them. And that's why we have in Ventura County 3 outstanding collaborative courts: military court, otherwise known as military diversion court. We also have mental health court and mental diversion court. Now, these are opportunities for individuals to have their case dismissed if they fulfill the terms and conditions the court imposes. It also enables individuals to seek out and receive medication-assisted treatment, inpatient psychiatric counseling, outpatient opportunities, addiction recovery. Again, it has to be specific to the case. It has to in no way jeopardize public safety. But that's one of the reasons we received from the Board of Supervisors the 2 additional mental health prosecutors. And with those 2 additional mental health prosecutors, we created this mental health unit. And I'm very, very grateful to Rosalind Wilford, Chelsea Noble, and Jennifer Feldman, the 3 DAs who are part of it, because they are looking at these complex cases and determining how best to resolve them while keeping the public safe.
Thank you. John, same question to you. What should they do, a DA, how should they approach cases that are involving charges against a person with severe mental illness?
Well, first of all, we have to follow the law, and Sacramento has enacted certain laws and how they want us to treat those with mental illness and give them programs. And if they go through those programs, their cases will just be dismissed as they never happen. The problem we have has nothing to do with our office. It has to do with the laws in Sacramento. You know, so much is being done for criminal justice reform, and it's all these reforms are inundating with DAs and DA offices around the country, around the state, that force us to be something we're not. Our primary goal is to serve crime victims. Now, when it comes to defendants, we have 2 responsibilities. Number 1, to uphold their constitutional rights. Number 2, to make sure any sentences that they receive are fair and just based on the circumstances. Outside of that, I don't have any responsibilities to criminals. But the problem is that the California State Legislature has poured on all these extra requirements now on our DAs, and we're swamped. Even in the mental health court that we have, it's a great idea. I mean, I support it. Californians have made it loud and clear that they don't want people with mental illness rotting away in prison or in local jails. But the tools that they've given us aren't working. What we need are programs that are more proactive on the front end before crimes are committed, and are more on the back end to reintegrate people with mental illness back into society so they can continue to get the treatment that they deserve. The problem is, by focusing it on criminal justice, they get that treatment. Then once their criminal sentence is done, they're out, and that we have no way to help them anymore.
Thank you. And John, we'll stay with you for the next question. We'll do an important shift and look at juveniles. John, what steps will you take to reduce recidivism and improve our juvenile justice system?
Well, I actually think the best way to reduce recidivism is to hold juveniles responsible for their crimes. Nobody likes to talk about this, especially for those between the ages of 14 and 17, which are traditional juveniles. But there are just some bad people in the world, and they need to be held accountable for their actions. If we don't hold them accountable, then it just reinvites, I think, further criminal activity. Now, that being said, if there's a place where criminal justice can focus on programs to help out those who are disadvantaged, the juvenile courts are it. I mean, that's basically what the juvenile justice system is supposed to be about, is helping juveniles and getting them the programs and the resources they need so they don't continue down a path of crime. But we've, in the rush to do that, we've taken away accountability. And there are just certain juveniles who commit crimes that just don't deserve to have any programs or anything given to them. The legislature has handcuffed us. We can no longer, for example, try juveniles in adult court who are 14 and 15-year-old at all. And I know of a case up in Northern California in Davis where a 15-year-old butchered 2 elderly people, butchered them, because his dream was to be a serial killer. Well, he's getting released next month, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. And the only way we're going to get him off the street is if he kills again. I don't want my family to be that sacrificial lamb. Do you?
Thank you. Eric, same question to you as far as what steps will you take to reduce recidivism and improve our juvenile justice system?
I appreciate the question, David. One of the ways to reduce recidivism is to not have a system by which all juveniles go through juvenile court. That is, there should be opportunities when safe and appropriate to do so, to divert them from that process. And that's essentially what this interface model through probation, as well as through our juvenile department under our supervisor, Maureen Byrne, will establish this summer. Let me go ahead and share it with your viewers. I mentioned it before, it's the transforming harm to healing. And the idea here is for certain offenses, for certain offenders, we want them to sit down with their victim. And they will sit down outside of the context of a courtroom because we want to hear directly from the offender as well as the victim. The offender needs to understand, how is it that this crime has harmed the victim? How has it harmed the community? And globally, to the extent it's possible through this facilitator, fashion a remedy. Obviously, you have to mete out a consequence. That's important, but you also want to understand the underlying roots of the problem and have the victim say, hey, you went ahead and you tagged my building. That was a loss to my patrons. Somebody had to clean that up. And I want you to understand how that has harmed the community. That's one way we deal with these issues. And then there are other ways where we'll continue, when it's egregious and heinous, to transfer these individuals to adult court with the permission of the court.
Thank you. Rebuttal, so John?
Yeah, so by law, we're required to put forth the programs that Mr. Massarenko talked about. And again, I support them, but any programs have to, the primary focus has to be victims' rights and making sure that the victims are not re-victimized again by being ignored or marginalized. Again, I'm open to anything that helps reduce recidivism, but victims have to come first. Their rights have to be guaranteed and protected.
Eric, anything?
Yeah, I would just mention that one of the ways we honor our victims is by letting Sacramento know we will not tolerate the early release of violent felons from state prisons. I joined a number of DAs statewide in that endeavor. I will continue to be the voice of victims to make sure that we block this really public safety endangering proposals that are coming from certain prison officials. So that is one way that we'll continue.
Thank you, Eric. Gonna have stuff there. But Eric, you're up first on the next question. Let's talk a little bit about the unhoused, the unsheltered. Eric, do you feel that unsheltered people living on the streets, parks, or in public lands are breaking the law? And what policies do you have to deal with that population?
No, I do not. It's not illegal to be homeless, nor should it be. It's the behaviors, it's the actions that accompany the unhoused that we have to focus on and really address. If somebody is fighting, if they are drinking in public, if they are using drugs, those are all criminal violations of California law. Simply being homeless, unhoused, is not per se illegal. Now, there are certainly there are certainly anti-camping ordinances that can be enforced, but in order to do so, you need to have housing for those individuals. That is, there has to be an adequate alternative that they can go to, where they can receive assistance and shelter. So I think ultimately the solution is multifold. It's multifaceted. It's enforcement, certainly, of vagrancy and criminal behaviors. It's also housing, case management and support, mental health treatment and intervention, but also addiction recovery, particularly in the co-occurring substance use disorder and mental disorder model. We know that so many of these individuals suffer from both. And one of the things that I want to do as the Ventura County DA is continue to work with collaborative entities, nonprofits, behavioral health, and the Ventura County Healthcare Plan to make those alternative models hopefully available.
Thank you. Same question to you, John. Do you feel that unsheltered people living on the streets, parks, public lands are breaking the law? What policies would you have to deal with that population?
No, obviously being homeless is not against the law. So I don't think being homeless by itself is a criminal act, but homeless people do commit crime. And what we're seeing a lot of is the fact that homeless people often will get cited, which means they'll just have a ticket written and they won't get arrested for their crimes. Even if they do get arrested, they get sent to jail, and instead of being held accountable for whatever crime they committed, they're being let out because of the new no cash bail programs that are going on because of Sacramento, and because of what they did. When we talk about the homeless problem, I think this is one area where government really needs to back off. We are not the experts on the homeless problem. Certainly as district attorney, I don't know how to solve the homeless problem, but there are really smart, dedicated people who can do the things that government only screws up when they do it, and that can get in there and be the proactive resource that I was talking about earlier. Let's get the people with the knowledge and the expertise to get in there and help these people before they commit crimes, before they do anything that warrants them me stepping in. Because if they commit a crime, if they hurt another person, I promise you, I'm going to prosecute them. I don't want to, but I will, because it's my job to protect victims' rights. So let's focus more on getting government out, because they are not the solution. Let's get in the nonprofit organizations that work and care for homeless people. Let's give them the support they need to be proactive, to actually come up with ideas to finally curtail our homeless problem.
Thank you. John, we'll stay with you for the next question. We'll turn our attention to guns and gun violence. So share with us your views or ideas about how to prevent gun violence. And also in particular, are you in favor of banning gun shows at the fairgrounds?
Yeah, gun violence has become such a huge problem in the United States. In fact, I think of all the gun deaths in the US last year, a little more than half were as a result of suicide, but the rest were the result of gun violence. And additionally, the vast majority, in a study released by the National Institute of Justice just a few months ago, revealed that the vast majority of gun crime being committed were by those who obtained their guns illegally. And yet we have politicians in Sacramento who continuously vote for criminal justice reform that seems to curtail the responsibility of criminals when it comes to the acts that they do, and seems to want to punish people who lawfully and responsibly possess guns. I'm not in favor of further gun control. I'm not in favor of banning gun shows from fairgrounds. In fact, I wrote an article about that last month in the Conejo Guardian, because if we want to curtail gun violence, if we really are serious about it, we need to go after the people who are obtaining their guns illegally, because they're the ones committing the crimes. The people who own guns responsibly and are exercising their Second Amendment rights to own and possess firearms are doing so legally. Remember, California is probably the most restrictive state in the union when it comes to the ownership and possession of guns. And so there's a lot of hoops that gun owners have to go through to be able to own and possess their guns legally. And they do that yearly, and we need to continue to adhere to that.
Thank you. Eric, same question to you. What are your policies to prevent gun violence, and would you be in favor of banning gun shows at the fairgrounds?
Let me just distinguish something that Mr. Barrick mentioned. True, individuals often acquire guns that are not permitted to do so. In particular, right now, the scourge of ghost guns. We're seeing an exponential increase in Ventura County. But there's another category that I want to bring to you and your viewers' attention, and that is those who are considered armed prohibited persons. So this is a class of individuals who lawfully purchased a firearm. That is, they went through Brady background. They went through the DOJ, they applied. They most likely received their firearm from a federally licensed firearm dealer. So they legally have a gun, but then something subsequent to that makes them a prohibited person from now owning and possessing it. Perhaps they are now subject of a restraining order, particularly a domestic violence one. They may have had a psychiatric breakdown or some type of mental disorder. They may have been convicted of an offense. Certain hate crimes, for example, carry 10-year prohibitions. You also have batteries that do the same. Felons for the duration of their life cannot possess guns. So this is 24,000 people that need to be identified to have guns seized and removed. So I am very much a proponent of doing that. I know that our sheriff and our law enforcement have grants to do so. I will support them.
You're out of time there, but real quick, are you in favor of banning gun shows?
You know, there's legislation proposed right now to do so. I'd have to study it, and then after doing so, I'll let you know.
Thank you. And let's see, we will begin the next question with you, Eric. As the top prosecutor, how will you ensure fairness among low-income and people of color in charging crimes?
Through a public-facing dashboard. We talked about that this afternoon in a separate meeting. And essentially what that means is allowing the public to be informed about charging and about sentencing. It's an issue I take very seriously. That is, are there discrepancies in the way we charge? Are there discrepancies in the way we file or recommend sentences? And the way that looks is you have to create a level playing field. And it's a very complex playing field to begin with, because in many instances, no two defendants are alike. One may have more criminal history than the other. One may be older or younger. The level of harm or trauma inflicted may be different. The input and direction given by the victims could also be different. So we have to make sure that when the facts are the same, that it's like for like, that these disparities are reconciled and that they don't exist. So I will continue to work with an outside vendor. We met with them last year. I'm going to do so again to see if we can create the data points, the evidence-based discussion that will allow us to really understand the way we charge, the way we recommend sentences, and the way we file. Because I think we all want fairness, we want equity in our system. And one way to make sure we're doing that is by looking at the data. We just don't have it yet. But I believe that our men and women in the office are performing their jobs fairly with equity and are doing the right thing.
Thank you. Same question to you, John, as the top prosecutor. How will you ensure fairness among low-income people and people of color when it comes to charging crimes?
Twofold. Number one, trust my deputies. Number two, stick to the facts. Speaking from personal experience, I've been a prosecutor for over 17 years. I've prosecuted some of the most violent criminals in this county during that time. And I've prosecuted some of the most terrible cases that you could possibly imagine. Never once in my career did I ever prosecute someone more harshly because of the color of their skin. And I've never been accused of that. In fact, I prosecuted hate crimes for 6.5 years. When I worked at the hardcore gang unit, I prosecuted the Hispanic gangs just as aggressively as I prosecuted the white supremacist gangs. And people may be surprised to learn there are white supremacist gangs in Ventura County. I trust our deputies. Ventura is actually really blessed that we have a lot of great deputy district attorneys here who do really great work and just want to do what's right for victims and their families. And I trust them. And I don't have any data whatsoever to suggest that they're out there prosecuting people of color any more aggressively than they are prosecuting anyone else. And to be able to ensure that, trust your DAs and stick to the facts of the case. If there's mitigating factors that warrant a lighter sentence, then we'll do it. If there's aggravating factors that warrant a tougher sentence, then we'll do it. And like I said, speaking from personal experience, that's how I've governed my career. That's how I've seen other DAs in our office govern our career. And that's how I expect them to continue governing their careers when I'm district attorney.
Thank you. The next question, John, you're up first for this one. We'll sort of follow a theme here. John, what do you think about restorative justice? What does restorative justice mean to you? And would you emphasize this as the DA?
Restorative justice, what it means to me are programs being made available to those charged with crimes. And if they do certain programs and adhere to certain rules and guidelines that they're assigned to, then their cases are going to be dismissed or treated more light. And I'm not in favor of programs in that arena. In other words, the arena that I operate in, which is to put victims first. Like I said, if you really want to do restorative justice, what the state of California needs to do is offer more proactive programs at the front end, especially to the more disadvantaged people who live in more disadvantaged communities, and more on the back end. Did you know that the average money spent by the state of California on each inmate who gets released from prison is $200? That's where restorative justice needs to be. It needs to be on the front end and on the back end, asking prosecutors whose primary focus is to serve crime victims and ensure accountability so that the laws of our society are upheld is not the answer. But the solutions I'm talking about are going to take time, effort, and money. And these are three things politicians in Sacramento don't have time for, because if they do that, it's going to take a generation, maybe two, to get the results we need. And they can't run on that. They can't run on re-election, and they can't run for their next office if they're doing programs that take 20 years to see any results. That's why we don't see them. But those are the answers. Those are the results we need to get the job done.
Thank you. Eric, same question. What do you think about restorative justice? What does restorative justice mean to you? And would you emphasize this as district attorney?
Absolutely. It means a great deal to me. And just to distinguish myself a little bit from Mr. Barrick, as the Ventura County DA, we oversee I oversee, frankly, 300 individuals and a nearly $60 million budget. We are fiscal administrators, we are policymakers, and we set the tone, the culture, and the priorities of the organization. We also bring resources in, we build coalitions, and we secure partnerships. And one of the partnerships that I'm very proud of is in the juvenile arena, which I talked about in this restorative justice, transforming harm to healing context, but also to see what we've done with school attendants. They're known as our SAR boards, and we have a specific program called Thrive. You know, it's progressive in nature. There are going to be situations where the individual just refuses to attend, and the parents are not in any way allowing school attendance to take place. But there are many instances where you have to understand, again, the underlying root causes of why that child is not in school. So when you think of restorative justice, you think of, can I link up this child with a public health official, with individuals from mental health, to understand addiction, to understand housing? That's one way we break the cycle of crime and prohibit them from essentially coming into the system.
Okay, thank you. John, rebuttal?
Yeah, I'm not a social worker. I have two responsibilities when it comes to those who hurt others. Ensure that your constitutional rights aren't violated. Ensure that any sentence you get is just and fair. I am to treat you fairly, equitably, and justly. Programs sound great, but that's not my role. I am not your friend. My job, the primary focus of the district attorney, has to be to put crime victims first. If we don't do that, we fail everybody.
David, can I,
rebuttal?
you know, this is kind of a difference in worldview here. Are we entirely, as prosecutors, retributive, meaning retribution only, looking in the past at conduct that's already done? Or are we more forward reaching, looking at the future, crime prevention, programs like Camp Hope to go ahead and steer kids away from lives of violence? Are we looking at domestic violence shelters so that we can break the intergenerational cycle? That's what I believe this job is about.
Thank you. Eric, you're up first on the next question. And will you tell us what you are doing to prosecute domestic violence batterers?
Thank you for the question, David. We received last spring a grant specifically to do just that from the federal government. It was to prosecute intimate partner battery, stalking cases, as well as domestic violence cases. And it was housed in part, that is the prosecutor, at the Family Justice Center, which is our one-stop wraparound service near the Ventura County Medical Center. And this was a really important bridge building endeavor, because it put this prosecutor at the Family Justice Center where they could interact with and reach out to victims who came in to seek services, restraining orders. And one of the ways we're going to facilitate, I believe, the enhancement of domestic violence cases is by creating greater access points for domestic violence victims. We're going to do that in Oxnard through the new Family Justice Center. This historically has been a community that has had mistrust of government officials, primarily because of their countries of origin. They may not speak the language or understand the culture. So we have received $3 million already for this Family Justice Center in Oxnard. We anticipate 2 million more. And I believe this is going to make a difference for domestic violence victims, because it's going to put the Oxnard Police Department, crime victims right in Oxnard, so they can have access points, care, and ultimately care to break the cycle of violence.
Thank you. John, same question to you. If you're district attorney, what will you do to prosecute domestic violence batterers?
I actually think our job does a pretty good job, a great job actually, of prosecuting domestic violence batterers. I currently serve in the homicide unit, and I've been doing that for over 7 years, but I did serve a term in the domestic violence unit. I pride myself on being an aggressive prosecutor, and I was always very proud of the domestic violence prosecutions that I took part in. So I'm actually proud of the work our office does in prosecuting domestic violence batterers. We have great attorneys who are doing a really good job. I can just tell you, I can't stand men who hit women, and I know there are domestic violence batterers who are females on men and females on females, but you know, violence is never the answer. And so I'm not I'm not really in favor of any programs for DV candidates either. If you hit someone, even if it's just a misdemeanor battery, you're gonna go to jail, in my opinion, because that is just not something that's right. But again, I do commend our office for the way we've always handled domestic violence cases. We've always, in my opinion, done a really good job.
Thank you. And I'll stay with you, John. Let's talk about children as well. What do you think is the role your office can play in ensuring the safety of a community's children?
The best way to ensure the safety of the community's children is to aggressively prosecute anyone whose goal is to hurt children. Again, when we talk about sexual abuse or sexual batteries or child molestation, I've always felt that our office does a really great job of really going after those people who do the molestation and the child rapes and that sort of thing. The ugly things that nobody ever wants to talk about, the things that Mr. Massarenko has handled in his career. And I can promise you, he's seen things that I haven't seen as far as some of his cases, some really horrific things. And again, I think, when it comes to those who are child molesters, in my opinion, there's no rehab or program that's ever going to fix them. Their minds are just wired differently. There is something about children that they want to attach themselves to sexually. And the best way to protect children and protect the public is to get them off the street and get them as far away from everyone as quickly as we possibly can, so they never hurt anyone else.
Thank you. Eric, same question to you. What do you think is the proper role for your office in ensuring the safety of communities' children?
I agree. We have to begin by holding those who harm children physically or sexually or through neglect accountable. These are among the most egregious crimes, and the legislator has left intact many of the punishments for them, and thank goodness they have, because these really are devastating to families, to children, and to communities. I will pivot and just say for a moment that, we can help children in a number of ways other than simply prosecutorial. I mentioned Camp Hope. That's our 1 week in the San Bernardino Mountains, soon to be the Santa Monica Mountains, to help children who have either been domestic violence victims or witnessed it in the household. They receive life building skills, empowerment skills in a natural setting. We also have a fantastic courtroom therapy canine program. We have 3 dogs in particular, all black Labradors, Comet, Star, and Tracker. They are there to assist children as they testify, to give them comfort, to give them solace, to help them when they face the offender, many strangers in the jury box, the sheriff deputies, as well as the judge. So we want to take these very traumatic experiences and help to mitigate them, help to give compassion to kids so that we can ultimately serve justice and make sure that they have a little less trauma in the experience.
Thank you, Eric. Gentlemen, we've been talking a lot about policies and that type of thing, but I want to take a step back and spend a few minutes to just learn a little more about you, your experience, your views. And I'll start off. The first question is with you, Eric. Tell us a little bit about your actual experience as a prosecutor, your experience level, and also what you think will make you or makes you a good leader. So your experience as a prosecutor and what makes you a good leader.
Thank you for the question, David. I've been a prosecutor for 14 years, tried 63 cases to verdict. As John mentioned, the last 5.5 in the sexual assault unit. That was really my passion, prosecuting child molesters and rapists, difficult cases, complex family dynamics. But I really found value and merit in them because the sentences were stiff and the results very gratifying. You can never have complete closure for these victims, but nevertheless, you can make sure the people who have harmed them are removed from the streets. In terms of just leadership, when I was the mayor of Ventura, I oversaw and managed a $370 million budget. So managing a $60 million budget as the district attorney is something I'm familiar with. We are indeed fiscal administrators. We have to make sure we have tight controls on our purse strings, that we're in budget, and that we're complying with all audits. The other thing that you have in this DA is someone who's been on the job for 15 months. You have a track record. You know what I've been able to accomplish, and I hope, voters willing, I'll be able to do so after June. So you have a known commodity here. You know what I've been able to accomplish, and I hope to be able to do more.
Thank you. John, same question. Tell us about your experience level as a prosecutor and what do you think makes you a good leader?
I've been a prosecutor for over 17 years now. I've prosecuted just about everything you can think of in our office. I've done 69 jury trials to date, many of them violent and serious felonies. I started out in the misdemeanor unit where I served for a year. I did the general trials, general felony unit for a year. I then did domestic violence for a year, serious and violent felonies for a few months. I then served in the hardcore gang unit for 6.5 years while simultaneously prosecuting all the hate crimes that occurred in the county during that same time. And I've also prosecuted homicides for the last 7+ years. I was awarded the Sherman Prize for combating hate in 2014. I've been twice named Prosecutor of the Year in Ventura County, which is a big deal. It's rare for DAs to get to win that twice, let alone twice in 4 years. My best attributes as a leader are my guiding principle. Victims come first. All of my decisions, everything I do are going to flow from that. I'm fair. I listen. I'm decisive. I'm confident under pressure. I'm a complete team player, and I'm not interested in being right. I'm only interested in getting it right. I have no problems talking with people in the unit in our office and getting ideas from them and implementing those ideas and giving them credit for those ideas. Because again, the office isn't about me. It's about the work we all do in trying to keep the residents of Ventura County safe.
Thank you. John, we'll stay with you for the next question along the same lines. Tell us a little bit about what you've done specifically outside of your job, outside of the courtroom. What efforts have you taken on to support crime victims and keep the community safe?
Well, I've spoken to a number of crime victim associations. I've spoken to parents of murdered children, for example. They've asked me to come speak to them. I interact specifically with crime victims. I served Project Lead, which is a great program where prosecutors, we get 2 prosecutors and 1 investigator. We go into 5th grade classes, usually 5th grade classes in the more disadvantaged neighborhoods of Ventura County. And we go there once a week for about an hour and we teach them about just the criminal justice system, what's fair and what's not fair, and what's right and not right, to try to steer them towards a better path than perhaps one that they've seen friends or family go on. In fact, it's pretty heartbreaking to hear stories. I remember one time we were speaking to a class and I was telling them about gangs. And this class was an area where there was a strong gang presence. And I was telling them about it's a terrible life for the gang member because their life is a dead end street. It never changes. If you continue on that path, you will end up in prison and you will end nowhere. And one of the children started crying because his brother was a gang member. And, when we talk about being proactive and trying to get people on the front end, Project Lead was actually a great program for that.
Thank you. Eric, same question to you. Tell us a little bit about some of your activities outside of the office and the courtroom to support crime victims and keep the community safe.
Thank you. Your viewers may not know this, but many years ago, prior to becoming an attorney, I was a court-appointed special advocate. And it was to a teenager who was in a group home. And, that helped me to understand his experience and the mentoring and the structure and the services that he really needed to succeed. So when I became a prosecutor and then became the district attorney, that initial experience in my 20s helped to inform my judgment. The need to reach out to others, to support them, to serve them, and to lift them up in any way we can. One of the things I've tried to do, David, is I want to be not just a prosecutor in the courthouse, but also one who serves the entire community. To give you a couple of examples, I attended a swearing in for new law enforcement members who graduated from the academy. And then thereafter went to a discussion with Black ministers to talk about how to prevent African Americans in schools from being bullied and being victimized by hate crimes. And I've also spoken to Crime Victims United to tell them about what we've done with our courtroom therapy dogs, our family justice centers, as well as our ability to attain additional resources. So these are all important efforts to serve our victims.
Thank you. And Eric, we'll stay with you for the next question. So as the district attorney, how will you prioritize the cases you will prosecute? I assume that there's always a challenge with the resources, staff. So what will be your highest priority as DA, and how will you prioritize the cases that you prosecute?
The highest priority has to be the most serious and violent cases. That has to continue to be a real central thrust of the organization, because these are cases wherein someone is alleged to have committed egregious acts of violence, of trauma, and many times inflicted physical injury. And we have a very dedicated major crimes unit for that undertaking. I also believe very seriously domestic violence, sex crimes, and gangs. These two are important areas that will maintain key priorities in our administration. But I also just want to highlight, fraud behaviors. It's critical that we continue to identify fraudulent behaviors, whether they're real estate scams, embezzlements, phishing scams on the internet, and to prosecute those vigorously and aggressively, because financial crimes, particularly among the elderly, can really upend individuals, can cause great financial loss. We just had a recent filing involving one of our senior deputies, Howard Weiss, where it's alleged that an individual was taking money in exchange for the publication of these driving under the influence brochures. And these are all cases that we have to continue to make a focus of the administration, as well as environmental crimes, those who hurt our waterways, our clean air, as well as our open spaces.
Thank you. John, same question to you. How will you prioritize cases as the district attorney, and what is your highest priority?
One of the things that always has amazed me about this country is we always talk about how important it is to protect children and how important it is to protect our elderly from being victimized. And yet it is rampant across the country. The amount of crime victims who are children or the elderly, it's skyrocketing and it's only getting worse. I want to see a priority on those who victimize either class of people, either children or the elderly. A lot of the elderly crimes, for example, and Mr. Massarenko mentioned this, are fraudulent. It's easy to say that we want to put a focus on serious and violent felonies, and we do. We absolutely do. You're talking to a prosecutor who's served in all those units practically that Mr. Massarenko just spoke about, hardcore gangs, hate crimes, homicides, serious and violent felonies. So I know how important it is. But earlier you asked a question about how to reduce the effect of crime on people of color. Well, part of the problem is that we over penalize, I think, certain crimes of poverty, and we under penalize certain crimes of fraud. Financial crimes are actually astronomically more damaging to society than violent crimes, than say robberies. And I'm not saying not to take those seriously, but I would love to see a renewed focus on fraud, financial fraud, because of the damage that does to any society and to the victims they create. To be the victim of a financial theft of great magnitude is so debilitating. And I'd like to see more of a focus on that.
Thank you. John, we'll stay with you for the next question. You're up first. So, John, what would be your plan as far as working with the community in order to gain a better understanding about how the office of district attorney is perceived? That is, how would you actually get out into the community and understand how your office is perceived and explain the office?
So I'm really big into communication with the community. I think the disconnect that has happened between my office and law enforcement and the community in general is because over the years we seem to have gotten away from that community outreach we used to do. And I'm not talking about going and talking to city councils or city mayors. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of a community, the people who do the things that actually need to get done in order to protect our communities. I'm talking about community groups that aren't city councils and that aren't politicians, but community groups that roll their sleeves up like I do and get their hands dirty and do the things that are necessary to ensure that public safety is a priority, but at the same time, to create a dialogue. Because if law enforcement and the community work together to create that dialogue, then we'll have that crime reduction. And that's definitely something that the DA's office and law enforcement needs to do, and we need to do that better, is to just hold these, not just meetings though. We hold meetings and we have groups and we get coalitions together and all they do is sit around and talk and nothing happens. I want to see action. I want to see actual things that take place. I don't have all the answers. Law enforcement doesn't have all the answers. I think a lot of community groups, a lot of people who work with the communities, they do have answers and they just need people to listen to them, but listen and implement. And that's, I think, really important as we move forward, because that's what the citizens of California certainly want to see.
Thank you. Eric, same question.
Can I respond?
Well, actually, I don't think I've given you this question yet, Eric.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Yeah, this is his 90 seconds.
Right, so you'll have 90 seconds for that. So same question to you, Eric. What is your plan to work with the community in order to gain understanding about how the Office of District Attorney is perceived by the community? 90 seconds.
I completely agree that you have to listen and implement, and that's exactly what we've been able to accomplish the last 15 months. When Assemblywoman Irwin called me and said, how can I help you and the residents and victims of Ventura County? I said, help support victims in Oxnard with the Family Justice Center. That resulted in a $1 million appropriation. Thereafter, we began discussions with the city of Oxnard, Chief Benitez, the city council, the mayor. We met with different nonprofit social justice groups, law enforcement, and we learned that we want to create momentum and financial support for that intake and victim outreach center. And that helped create 2 million more from the city of Oxnard. And soon the county will match it, creating a $5 million project. That's how you listen and implement. Similarly, the sexual assault grant. Last week, Congresswoman Julia Brownley let us know that she had appropriated $950,000 to support and strengthen the $2.5 million that we already received from the Department of Justice, thanks to Senior Prosecutor Lauren Milan and the Sheriff's Department. That's the kind of collaboration, networking, and connections that bring resources to our county, that serve victims, and ultimately can help hold offenders accountable.
Thank you. And rebuttal, John, 30 seconds.
Yeah, just briefly, when Mr. Massarenko announced the creation of the Family Justice Center in Oxnard, I was actually thrilled. I'm all for something that gives more services to victims, but I thought it was going to be a satellite office, not a whole new Family Justice Center. And let's not forget, the Family Justice Center was started by Greg Totten and was taken off the ground by Cheryl Temple. And the problem is that's a lot of money for a building. I would like to see that money for services.
Thank you. Eric, 30 seconds.
And there indeed will be services. Mr. Barrick bemoans the legislature and sort of talks about things that he doesn't like about it. But nevertheless, you think about people like Assemblymember Grayson and the Family Justice Center bills that appropriate money for intervention, support, for victim advocates that help fund the family justice centers. So this is one way we utilize state legislation to achieve better outcomes for victims.
Okay, thank you. And see, Eric, I think you're up first on this one. Is that, not quite sure if I got this the right order. My list says, Eric, you're up. So Eric, what types of diversion programs do you support and how would these be funded?
A couple of them we've talked about already, beginning with mental health diversion. It's now codified in state law. It's been in effect for several years. The challenge that we all face is making sure that the infrastructure is adequate to successfully divert these individuals to meaningful programs, rehabilitation, and treatment. The County of Ventura is looking at a specific site in unincorporated county land for a mental health rehabilitation center. They have expanded the number of inpatient psychiatric beds at Helmont to 43. So these are all opportunities to divert people away from the criminal justice system that I think are very meaningful and important. I'm studying very closely the governor's CARES announcement, which is more in a civil context, but it's to link behavioral specialists, case managers, and public defenders with certain types of cases for better management and outcomes. Again, I think it's very important that when we pass this legislation, that we look at whether or not there is an adequate apparatus by which to treat and help all these individuals. And I believe very strongly that addiction recovery has to be at the forefront. We should have inpatient sober living facilities in our county to the extent they are possible to comply with zoning and other rules, but that's one way we divert people successfully.
Thank you. John, same question. What types of diversion programs do you support and how would these be funded?
So I'm actually in support of a lot of diversion programs. I'm just not in support of them where they're being implemented. Like I said, if we really want to fix criminal justice system and reduce recidivism, we need to be more on the front end and more on the back end. Asking us to implement mental health diversion and judicial diversion only takes away our role, our primary focus, which has to be crime victims. Let me tell you something about mental health diversion. Mental health diversion was one of those programs that's great. It sounds great. It holds people accountable and gets those who are mentally ill the help they need. One of the drawbacks, of course, it only works during the time period when the judicial system has jurisdiction over them. Once that ends, all the programs stop because we don't have jurisdiction over them anymore. Well, now the legislature has come out with judicial diversion, and what's happening in our courtrooms is that a lot of defense attorneys are realizing, well, it's just easier to try to get someone on judicial diversion. And if you don't know what this is, that's a misdemeanor program where basically the judge puts you in a program, you have to adhere to some laws, you're unsupervised, and if you can do that for 6 months, your case gets dismissed. Well, because the mental health diversion is so difficult on all these misdemeanors, a lot of our defense attorneys are now just asking for judicial diversion, the judges are granting it, and away goes the case. So people aren't even getting the help they need. And to respond to something Mr. Massarenko said earlier, I do bemoan the legislature because the last 10 years, they've done nothing but sell out crime victims. And if you're serious about standing up for crime victims, you'd be bemoaning them too.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Rebuttal?
Yeah, I just don't believe it's productive to be stewing constantly in resentment and grievance. I just don't think that helps build collaboration, partnerships, and just outcomes for our victims. We have to go ahead and identify opportunities for collaboration, for greater funding, and for greater services. There are certainly pieces of legislation that I find very just distressing. A bill that made it more difficult.
Thank you, Eric. Sorry. John, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll be quite honest with you. I'm not interested in collaborating with politicians who've done nothing but sell out crime victims for the last 10 years and only seem to put forth legislation that gives the appearance of caring during an election year. My endorsements come from frontline law enforcement officers and others who work to actually try to keep their community safe. I am not endorsed by anyone who sells out crime victims. So that's why I bemoan the legislature.
Thank you. I think, well, you guys are really testing me here, but I think you already used your rebuttal, Eric. Did I get that right? Yeah.
I think I did. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, you guys are really good. I'm not gonna, hopefully I'll get a passing grade today.
Well, we are prosecutors. We try to be fair.
Yes, I guess I'll stay out of the office. John, that's actually an interesting segue to this next question here. So we've talked a lot about your office, but how does the office affect the day-to-day lives of law-abiding systems, people who do not get in trouble with the law?
I think the best way to do that is to know that if we're holding people accountable who hurt others, then they're going to sleep better. Quite frankly, that's how we can ensure their safety, is to let them know you go to sleep I've got this. We are going to do everything necessary to protect you and to protect your family, to protect your children, to protect everyone you love, because that's my job. My job is to get in the trenches, to hold that line, and to keep the dark things that happen that I have seen, that Mr. Massarenko has seen, that a lot of prosecutors and I in our office have seen, to keep that from the eyes of, you know, the citizens who don't break the law and who don't get in trouble. And that's one of the things I relish about being a prosecutor. You know, I not only love to protect those who, or fight for those who can't fight for themselves. I like fighting for the people who don't need it, because they don't need it because I'm doing it. You know what I'm saying? And I just love that. That's one of the things I just love about my job. There are no words or phrases to describe adequately how much I love what I do and how much I put into this job every day for people. And knowing that people have no idea what I do, that's my greatest compliment. That's the greatest thing you can say to me, quite frankly.
Thank you. Eric, same question. Tell us about how your office affects the day-to-day lives of law-abiding citizens.
You know, one of the ways we can make great impact, and I believe we do already, the entire office, speaking at schools, going into classrooms and talking about who we are, what we do, and the mission we serve. John had mentioned Project Lead. I'm a strong proponent of it. I've spoken at a number of different schools, both colleges, high schools, middle schools, continuation schools, to let people know about serving justice, how we perform safety in our community, and also, frankly, about the role of a litigator, an attorney in society, and the skill set that one needs to acquire as well as the education in order to become one. But, you know, one of the ways I reach out to the communities is I talk to them about crime prevention, and not just schools and in classrooms. You talk to people about how not to become a victim of catalytic converter theft, or how to harden your home to prevent that home from becoming susceptible to South American theft groups. When you deliver these messages to communities, when you reach out in people's backyards, when you go to Rotaries and service clubs, people get engaged, they become informed, and ultimately they are less vulnerable, less susceptible to becoming victims. So I'm very much a big believer in crime prevention messaging.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we've reached the time where it's ready to begin our closing statements. We will do it in the reverse order of the opening statements. So our first candidate will be Eric Massarenko. When you're ready, you'll have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking you, David, for moderating this great forum. To Mr. Barrick, thank you for being a part of it. And also to the League of Women Voters of Ventura County for hosting it. I want to share with you some of the people that are supporting me, that are behind my candidacy. And I'd like to begin with Mike Bradbury, who served as the Ventura County District Attorney for 24 years, perhaps one of the longest serving in Ventura County history. He has supported my candidacy. He has endorsed it, and he believes I have the skills and attributes to continue to lead this outstanding office of men and women. Former Sheriff Jeff Dean, former Oxnard Police Chief Scott Whitney, existing Police Chief David Livingstone of the city of Simi Valley, Community College Police Chief Joel Justice, Ventura City Fire Chief David Ndaya. But that's law enforcement. I'd like to go beyond that and show you the other groups and entities on behalf of Eric Massarenko in his candidacy to remain DA. Just the other day, I was very heartened to receive the endorsement of the women lawyers of Ventura County, who I believe are acknowledging the great efforts we're making to support and serve crime victims, especially women, and the efforts we're making in the office to be sensitive to their needs in the office setting. And then also, most recently, the Sierra Club has also endorsed my candidacy because of our strong environmental efforts.
Thank you. And our next candidate, John Barrick, when you're ready, 90 seconds.
Well, let's talk about who's not endorsing Mr. Massarenko, and that's any active member of law enforcement. I've been endorsed by every peace officer association in the county including 3 statewide agencies, which cover just about every law enforcement agency you can think of in the state of California. The reason that's a big deal is twofold, is because number one, if you want to be the DA of Ventura County, you have to be supported by law enforcement because they're on the front lines keeping victims safe. I have that support. And in the history of our county, we've never elected a DA who wasn't supported by law enforcement. Number two, we've never had a sitting DA, as Mr. Massarenko, who wasn't supported by law enforcement. And so these are 2 big things, because we're trying not to be like Los Angeles County or San Francisco County, where those counties do elect DAs who aren't supported by law enforcement. This is Ventura County, and we want to stay Ventura County. You know, state legislatures seem to ask 2 questions when it comes to criminal justice reform. Who did you hurt, and how can I help you? And I feel that needs to stop, because California legislatures, I promise you, do not care about crime victims. If there's anything you take away from tonight's forum, I want you to remember this. Someday you or a loved one, or someone you know, is going to become a victim of crime. And if you are, I promise you, I'm the district attorney you want in your corner, because I am the only one who's going to give you everything I have to bring back your dignity and bring back justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to both candidates for your service to the County of Ventura and for taking on the effort of running for office. That is a great challenge in our democracy. It's a hard thing for your families and everyone else that volunteers and works for both of you. So at the League of Women Voters, we commend both of you for taking on public service and that effort. At this time, I'd like to bring back the president of the League of Women Voters, Betsy Patterson.
Hi, just as we end this candidate forum, I would like to share some information with our voters. Oh, no, I won't be able to do that tonight because I can't share my screen, David.
Okay, that's coming up. Hold on.
Meanwhile, thank you both for being here at our candidate forum. It's always informative to have you speak and answer questions from our voters. Now, may I do it?
Yes, you can.
Great. So we're getting out the message to plan your vote and to let everybody know that your official ballot will be mailed to all registered voters on May 9th, starting on May 9th. The important thing to remember is that after you've filled out your ballot and put it in the official return envelope, you need to sign the back of the vote by mail envelope before you return it, either by the U.S. Postal Service or at a drop box. And there are 3 ways that you can return your ballot. You can return it back postage paid through the U.S. Postal Service. You can drop it in any one of the drop boxes around the county that are going up. And you can also return it in person to a vote center. And the drop boxes open when the ballots are being sent out on May 9th. Early voting in person starts on May 28th, with 10 vote centers being open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. For the first week. And then all 51 vote centers will be open June 4th through the 6th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on election day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And finally, just remember, check your voter registration status. Even if you are positive that you are registered to vote, check and make sure it has the right mailing address, it has your right residential address. If you want to find out where the drop boxes and vote center locations are, you can do that at our elections office website, which is venturavote.org. And one of the coolest things, I think, is that you can track your ballot by signing up and registering at Where's My Ballot, sos.ca.gov. It will send you an email or text message to let you know that your ballot has been mailed, that the Postal Service has received it. And when you receive it and you put it back in the U.S. Postal Service, they will send you an email saying the U.S. Postal Service has received it and is processing it to send it to the elections office. And then when the elections office receives it, you get a text or an email saying that they have received it, they have processed it, and your vote will be counted. Finally, just want you to know that there are nonpartisan candidate information sources available at Voters Edge, which is the League of Women Voters educational site for educating voters in a nonpartisan way. And Ballotopedia is also a nonpartisan site where you can look up a sample ballot and see where to vote. You can contact us at our website or through email. And just a last reminder that we are also on all these social media places too. And finally, we still have more candidate forums coming, so please register and join us for the upcoming candidate forums that are following. Thank you very much, and I will stop sharing my screen and let David Marin say goodnight.
Thank you to everybody for watching. As a reminder, this was being recorded and you can see it on our website. Go to lwvventuracounty.org and candidate forums, and you'll see all of our videos of past forums. It takes us about 24 to 36 hours until this is up there. I'm sure many of you want to watch it again right now, but give us a day and a half and we'll have it up there. So thank you again to the candidates and to our volunteers, Betsy Patterson, Kathy Morgan, Maddie Park, and Cheryl Collard for helping tonight. And with that, we'll say goodnight. Thank you all, and good night.